preview on that front, and we're still investigating. Go ahead.
Regarding kids and vaccines, a new poll is talking about 2/3 of parents with kids between 5 and 11, they're having a wait-and-see attitude or they're resisting it altogether. And so what is the White House doing to combat that vaccine hesitancy amongst parents?
Well, first, I would note that we have experienced this before, because if you look back to December, only about 30% or just over that of people who are eligible for vaccines said they would want to take a vaccine. And now we're at nearly 80% of eligible adults or people who are of the eligible age who have now received their first dose. We have launched, and we announced the launch last week, or our intention to launch, a major campaign to communicate with parents, to communicate with families about the safety and the efficacy of these vaccines should they get approval. We will also be prepared to have the doses needed to ensure that parents can get vaccines to their kids. But what we're really focusing on is working with pediatricians. We know that the pediatricians are one of the most trusted sources of information for any parent. I can confirm that myself. And so we're really encouraging parents to talk to their pediatricians, of course, to wait for approval before they proceed, but to have those conversations, and that will be what our strategy is guided around.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Two questions. One is about the Moscow conference. The United States was not able to participate. What was the reason? Number two, NATO conference, any result? And number three, so many Afghan people, especially women, they are under torture of the Taliban, and they have high expectation from the United States. I don't know, you guys still committed to help Afghan people, or United States totally forget Afghan people?
Absolutely not. On the last piece, we remain absolutely committed to helping the Afghan people. We remain the largest provider of humanitarian assistance of any country in the world, and we're committed to ensuring there is the ability for people who want to leave to depart, ensuring there are flights that can depart to do that, or people can cross over land, and continue to work with reliable international organizations like the World Food Program to provide that assistance. In terms of the NATO conference, I know our Secretary of Defense spoke to that. I'd point you to his comments in his press conference on the ground. And on your first question, I know my colleague at the State Department, Ned Price, said that the United States supported the talks. We were unable to attend for logistical reasons. We believe the Troika Plus, which is what this forum or format is, has been an effective and constructive forum. We look forward to engaging that forum going forward, but we weren't in a position to be a part of it this week, but we will in the future. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify, you've been, earlier at the start of this, you talked about how universal pre-K, family leave, are those things that will definitely be in the bill? Because you're saying no matter what happens, it looks like we'll have at least this much. So I was just wondering, can you clarify, are those things definitely going to be in there? Are those red lines for the president?
I'm not here to set new red lines. What we know is that this is going to be the most historic investment in child care and care in the care economy ever in history, and that there will be programs put in place that have not existed in the past. Hopefully we will know more soon what the final package looks like, but I just wanted to outline some of the key components that there's continued discussion about.
You didn't mention Medicare expansion in that. Is that intentional? Why not?
It was not intentional. I was trying to give a couple of examples, because sometimes we miss the historic comparison here on what we're talking about and what kind of a dramatic impact this package will have on families across the country and what it's tracking to be. There are still final pieces that need to be concluded, and I can't give you a final fact sheet quite yet, but that's what I wanted to lay out for all of you.
Another quick question. Does the White House have any thoughts on the Supreme Court? Yes, they're taking up the Texas abortion law, but they're not going to rule on the constitutionality of it. Does the White House have any thoughts on that?
I would, beyond what I said to Peter, I don't have anything additional from here. I'd point you to the Department of Justice. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Just to follow up on the Medicare expansion, do you have any updates? President Biden addressed some of these discussions last night, and whether this will be an actual expansion or vouchers for things such as dental work. Is there any update in those discussions?
Not yet. He talked a little bit, for those of you who didn't watch the town hall last night, from 8 to 9:30. He talked a little bit about how he wants to, his objective of working to bring down the cost. So I think you're referring, just to translate for everybody to bring them up, he talked a little bit about the possibility of vouchers for dental, something that's in discussion, but there's no new information I can provide to all of you. He also talked about the hearing aids and bringing down the cost of hearing aids, and bringing that cost down and addressing it for seniors is a huge priority to him. He also mentioned last night how when you look at seniors and what they're struggling with, including dementia, that hearing and the ability to hear is an important priority. Still in discussion, clearly a priority to a number of key leaders in the Senate, but there's not a final conclusion before I came out here today.
Along those lines, Nancy Pelosi, who I believe had breakfast here this morning.
She did. She was here. I'm not sure what they ate, but they met. So yes.
She indicated that a climate deal was close and suggested it could be done. Has the White House and congressional Democrats identified any substitute for the Clean Energy Performance Program that looks to be removed at Joe Manchin's request? And if so, what is it?
Well, the president talked a little bit last night about the fact that, and I would say it's still on track to be, because there are so many climate components in these two packages that the president has proposed, including climate tax credits and tax cuts, which have been a part of his proposal, has broad support in the Senate. There are also key components, since you gave me the opportunity, that have been in the infrastructure plan that often we don't talk enough about, including moving toward electric vehicles, 500,000 charging stations across the country, which would be a huge impact, have a big impact in moving toward an industry that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Replacing lead pipes in water. I think many of you may have seen today that the state of Michigan issued a state of emergency because of lead in pipes. This is an area and a place that has a climate impact, that has a humane impact. These are all components that are under discussion, and obviously the infrastructure pieces have passed, but continue to be a part of what the president's proposed. But addressing the climate, making this the largest climate bill in history, we'll continue to be on track toward that.
Just lastly, the president last night said he would entertain the notion of doing away with the filibuster to pass voting rights, and then he added, and maybe more. What's the maybe more?
Stay tuned. It's to have a discussion. I expect you'll hear more from the president about it in the coming weeks. Go ahead.
Matt took my climate question, but
That's okay. You can ask it in a different way.
No.
Okay.
On immigration, though, the president said yesterday that the administration's stance is that it is opposed to MPP, the Remain in Mexico policy, but there's a court order, and you're implementing that court order right now. But even with that court order addressed a previous memo the administration issued to terminate MPP. It's been months since this court order, and there's still no new memo out.
And
why is that?
Secretary Mayorkas has indicated he plans to issue a new memo, and that we do oppose the MPP program, as the president said last night. I would point you to the Department of Homeland Security on an update on the status.
Given that he is saying the administration is opposed and he's criticized us in the past, it seems like there's not a sense of urgency to get this memo out since it's been months.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think we've been clear about our opposition to this, but again, there was a court order. So what we're working to do is move toward the release of a new memorandum, something that would come from the Department of Homeland Security, and while also abiding in good faith by a court order and following the law.
I had a follow-up on Afghanistan,
Sure.
too. Just given that the embassy is currently closed right now in Kabul as well, if you're an Afghan and you still are hoping to find relief and come to the U.S., is there any way to actually get parole or refugee status without going to a third country?
Well, we have a presence in Doha, one that engages with officials on the ground. We've also had recent meetings with leaders of the Taliban, as you all know, and has been reported publicly. And our State Department is leading this effort. So yes, absolutely there is. We have worked to help individuals who have stood by our side and fought by our side over the course of the last 2 months since we left. We ended our military presence there. We've put out, I know the State Department put out numbers on U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents who have departed from Kabul. We wouldn't be able to do that unless we had the diplomatic presence in Doha and were able to engage with and work with authorities on the ground. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Last night also the president said that paid leave was down to 4 weeks. When he said that, did he mean that it would be a permanent program and that it wouldn't be sunsetted any time over the next decade? And did he mean that it would be 4 weeks and scale up, or just 4 weeks flat?
I think he was conveying that he had proposed 12 weeks. It was closer to 4. The specifics of the details and where that sits right now, I don't have an update for you on.
Okay, so closer to 4, not necessarily 4.
Again, Francesca, he was just speaking to where things stood last night. There's obviously been ongoing discussions this morning, but clearly making sure paid leave is law, is a reality for working parents across the country is a priority. That's why he proposed it. But in terms of the exact status, I don't have an update for you on that in this moment.
And on free community college,
Yep.
he said, I promise you, I guarantee you, we're going to get free community college in the next several years across the board. So what makes him so certain that he'll be able to get community college, free community college in the next several years if it's not going to be included right now?
He's in the first 9 months of his presidency, and he knows and understands, as he said last night, that that making community college accessible, that ensuring we have a more educated workforce out in the country is in the interest of the private sector, in the interest of U.S. competitiveness, and certainly in the interest of the American people. There's still discussions about how to make community college more accessible, more affordable. These pieces are still being negotiated. I think what you heard from him, or what the American people heard from him last night, is not just his marital obligation, but is his commitment to getting this done because he thinks it's in the interest of the United States and our workforce here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. I'd like to ask first about press access and then about coronavirus origins. We as a press corps are fairly unanimous in our opposition to the mysterious pre-screening process that's been going on for presidential events in the East Room. And so I'm hoping that you can demystify for us how White House staff are selecting which journalists get into these events. Is it first come, first serve, or something else? And also, how long will this pre-screening remain in place?
Well, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, as you know. People are wearing masks in this room. As a reflection of that, we have certain requirements here as well among staff. And I think we don't have the size of numbers that we would all like to have in the East Room, and we hope that we make changes to that soon.
The decisions made.
Is that not important, that we're going to expand access and make sure more people can get into the East Wing?
Everyone here, but how are the decisions made about who gets to go in?
There's a limited number that we have based on how many people are attending as guests. I don't have any more information on that. Go ahead, Karen. I think we're going to move on. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Has the president spoken to Senators Manchin or Sinema today since the town hall last night?
I don't have any updates on his call specifically, but we have been in regular touch with them, even through the course of the morning, from senior staff.
You had said in answer to Phil's question that the president last night was focusing on the nitty-gritty details and that he was candid about where the negotiations stood. He was also much more candid in pointing out the roadblocks that Senators Manchin and Sinema have put up to some of the things he would like to do and what they're opposed to. Did he do that to try and move them through public pressure, or was it to lay the groundwork for what will be a scaled-back final deal on this?
He was simply candidly answering questions. He also referred to Senator Sinema as someone who's smart as the devil, which he has used many times in the past to describe the vice president, to describe Rahm Emanuel. It's a point of endearment from him. He described Senator Manchin as a friend. He believes and continues to believe that he is negotiating and working with both senators in good faith, and that we all are working towards shared objectives. So he was simply answering questions that were asked by the audience and the moderator. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, this follows a little bit on that. This week has been an interesting mix of inside game with his behind-the-scenes talks and outside game with Scranton and Baltimore. My question is whether the time has passed where speeches can be expected to be effective in moving any votes. I mean, do you think any member watched the town hall meeting and said, "Oh, that's going to change my vote"?
I'm not sure that his audience were people who are currently residing in this area in this zip code, right? His audience was the American people who have questions about what this means for them, for childcare, and how it will help them. For people who really want to send their kids to pre-K but can't afford it. For people who are worried about paid leave and hoping that's a reality for them when they're at the point of having children or needing to care for loved ones. And so the audience was really the public and the American people, and the vast majority of questions came from individuals in the audience last night.
Isn't it fair to say that the important thing right now is the him working his relationships and the inside game to get the votes?
Has been important from the beginning, and the president has obviously played a key role here in bringing different viewpoints together toward a shared path forward. That's the role that he has played as president, the role he promised to play when he ran for president. Again, running on the fact that compromise is not a dirty word, and he believes he can bring people together from differing viewpoints. He also believes, and a lot of members will tell you or others this too, that part of his role is talking to the American public about the benefits of these packages and explaining to them beyond sometimes the noise and important conversation about the mechanisms of who's for it and against it and the size and the numbers, about how this is going to help them. So last night was an opportunity to do that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. My first question is on the president's climate agenda. So yesterday, Corinne seems to suggest that should CEPP fail to be included in the reconciliation bill, executive action is an option. Do I have that correctly? Do I understand that correctly, first of all? And then second, should his climate agenda fail in Congress, whether CEPP or other components, can we expect executive action, some sort of executive order before the president's trip to Europe so that he may have a stronger message on a global stage on climate?
Well, I think it's important to note that some of the progress the president's made to date, some has been executive action, like rejoining the Paris Agreement, but some has been simply by working with leaders in the auto industry to bring them together to agree upon shared investments in the electric vehicles industry. So there's a lot of ways that the president will continue to work, use the levers of his power to make sure we are reaching his bold and ambitious goals. And we've talked a little bit in here about the rhodium study from the other day, which showed that there are a lot of different paths forward to reach those goals. Some of them legislative, some of them through actions he can take as president, some of them through working with the private sector and other leaders who share his commitment to getting to addressing the climate crisis.
Closing that option. My second question.
I actually don't think that's the case. So just to be clear, what was your question? Just to be clear for the record here.
Executive action before the president leaves for Europe next week.
I think what I was giving for you is a contextual answer on how we're going to achieve our climate objectives, which is, of course, what he's going to go to Paris. Paris, we're not going there, but what I mean, it was like a little. I wish what he's going to talk about when he's in Glasgow. And I think what leaders will understand is that there are a lot of paths to get there. This is a president who's committed to addressing the climate crisis. He's taken executive action. He's also brought leaders together. And as you heard him say last night, he's confident that we can get this passed and get the biggest climate bill passed through Congress in the near term. Go ahead.
I have a second question, Jen. Sorry. And I'm going to try this again. I know you've answered the question on Taiwan like 10 times already, but as you said yourself, words matter. So my question is, did the president simply misspoke last night, or was he actually sending a signal that there may be some sort of informal shift that the U.S. commitment towards Taiwan may be more firm?
His policy has not changed, but that's, I think, important for people to know and understand. Go ahead.
A quick question, follow-up from yesterday. Your colleague Karine said last year, under Trump, during the holidays, families were facing down a dark winter with less economic security than ever before. But this year, families are facing highest gas prices in 7 years, 30% higher costs to heat their homes, inflation that is almost 5 times higher than it was in December. Groceries are more expensive. So I'm wondering what Americans are facing this Thanksgiving and Christmas under President Biden when looking at economic security.
Well, I would say we have cut in half the unemployment rate, created 5 million jobs, ensured that 180 million Americans have been vaccinated since last year. So, yes, are there still, as the economy is turning back on, are there still fundamental issues we're working through? Absolutely. That's why the president's pushing to get his agenda done. But I think there's no question that a year ago, when we were locked in our homes, when only 1% of people were vaccinated, when 10% of people in this country were unemployed, that was an incredibly dark time and dark period in our country. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Jen. I want to ask you about public opinion polls, which I'm sure you recognize. The president's public opinion polls have declined sharply over the last few months. And I want to get a sense from you, in speaking to your White House colleagues, why you think that is. I know you've mentioned COVID before, but is it also because of the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan? Is it the stalled agenda for President Biden? What do you suppose is the reason that we've seen this slide in the president's approval ratings?
Well, a lot of people in this room work for organizations that have done polls, and there's a lot of underlying data in them, and sometimes it differs. So I would just go back to what our view is that we're still going through a hard time in this country, and people are tired of fighting a pandemic. They're tired of the impact on their lives. Some of them are sick and tired of people who won't get vaccinated, who they feel are impacting their ability to live life in a normal way. Some people are still fearful for loved ones, and we all thought that it would be over at this point in time. Obviously, the Delta variant and other factors have led to this to be extended. So there's no question that the fatigue with COVID is impacting people around the country. The president understands that. He's empathetic to that, and he knows that the best thing he can do is help get COVID under control, continue to work to address some fundamental issues in our economy, put people back to work, and that's what he's focused on every day.
Turn things around, Jen. What's the way? Is it just getting victories? Is it passing the bipartisan infrastructure bill? What's the way that you think President Biden can turn around these sliding approval ratings?
He can keep his head focused on doing the job as president, leading the American people, putting in place fundamental changes that will make people's lives better. Go ahead, Shelby.
Thanks. The DHS secretary said, I think it's just about a month ago now, that the investigation into the horseback Border Patrol agents would be completed in days, not weeks. Has the White House received any update on this investigation? Was there any conclusion on whether these Border Patrol agents were whipping migrants?
It's really under the Homeland Security Department. I can check with them and see what the status is. I know what he said at the time, and I will see if there's any particular update on that.
Is the White House in active communication with the DHS on this? Like, do we know why?
Yes, but they're overseeing the investigation. So I would point to them on any update on the status. Go ahead. Okay, one more. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Seeing what we're witnessing happen in Haiti right now, with the threat of the 17 missionaries starting to be killed, is there any conversation within the administration to stop deportations that are happening, or using the administration's power to grant humanitarian parole? What's being done, or even adding U.S. military presence on the ground?
So what I think it's important to note here is, obviously we are working around the clock to bring these people home. They're U.S. citizens, and there has been targeting over the course of the last few years of U.S. citizens in Haiti and other countries too. It's not the only country, but since we're talking about Haiti, and for kidnapping for ransom. That is one of the reasons that the State Department issued the warning they did in August about the risk of kidnapping for ransom. So this is a little bit of a different category of individuals in the country and what they're being targeted for. That's why we issued that warning. At the same time, we are continuing to provide humanitarian assistance, to work with officials on the ground, to work through our embassy, to certainly address the underlying conditions as people in the country attempt to move forward or try to recover from a combination of the earthquake and the assassination of the leader. Thanks so much. Again, I think it's important to note that these individuals were U.S. citizens who were targeted. So we're working to bring them home. Obviously, the Department of Homeland Security and State does evaluate any conditions before they send people back to any country, as they've done here, and there has been no change. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jen.
You too. Thank you.